Welcome back to Zacks Research Desk. I'm Cooker, and today's topic, Year of the Photonic Basket Trade. Let's dive in. So, my top 14 stocks to buy and trade in the optical, photonic, laser realm. We'll talk about many of them. Here's the list. Obviously, stop the video anytime and take a screenshot. I'll also make the slide deck available. All right, so why? Why am I talking about a photonic basket buy and trade year? Well, here's the thesis. Optical related stocks are obviously hot commodities, especially after NVIDIA dumped $2 billion investments each into Lumentum, Coherent, and Marvell. Light and Coherent were March 2nd, I believe, and Marvell came in early April here. So I think they offer terrific investing and trading opportunities because the volatility is going to be big and the emotional arguments over valuation are going to be loud. And so that creates your big swings. Plus, the big background is the AI bubble worries. So from canceled data centers to GPU competition, shortage bottlenecks. We've got a shortage in memory. There's not enough energy to go around. So those bottlenecks will create hiccups in the AI trade, especially if investors are worried about data centers being delayed or canceled. So that'll just exacerbate the volatility in the photonic stocks. All right. You may remember right before GTC was March 16th, the week before, Jensen put out a blog titled AI is a 5-layer cake. And here's a graphic from ChatGPT that illustrates the 5-layer cake. Energy on the bottom, chips, infrastructure. When you think infrastructure could be everything from the networking, the building, the cooling, right? So there's a lot that covers infrastructure, just like there's a lot to cover chips. We're gonna be focused on optical photonic chips today, and not even talk about memory. We talked about memory in February or March. So here are the layers: large language models, and then applications off of the large language models. Let's take a closer look. So here's a screenshot of the actual NVIDIA blog from March 10th, a week before GTC, with the 5-layer cake, energy chips, infrastructure models, applications, and then examples of each. Jensen likes to talk about AI factories, producing intelligence and tokens. So so much going on here. It's like, this is why this is in what I call the 5th industrial revolution. All right, here are descriptions of each layer. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I gotta move my menu out of the way here. Obviously, you can't see the Zoom menu, but it's in my way sometimes. Okay. Keep rolling here. So within the chips, which is its own layer in the cake, right above energy, is just the photonic sector. And that can have its own layers. It's obviously its own supply chain. So this is a good follow on X. I always refer to intelligent investors and engineers, some who work in semiconductors, from X. Gaetano has a little firm called Crux Capital. And he made this cool graphic of photonics having its own stack, its own supply chain. So lasers, photonic chips, a finished module, a deployed AI network all sit at different points in one long chain. And he emphasizes different companies get paid for totally different reasons on totally different timelines. Yeah, that's important to understand. We're going to be talking a lot about what would be layer 5, optical devices, engines, and module content. That's where Lumentum and Coherent sit, probably Marvell too. And then Marvell and Broadcom are in connectivity too on layer 6. But we'll also mention some testing companies in layer 4. Obviously, Taiwan Semi is essential to all this as the foundry. But there's another tower semiconductor, TSEM, is important to look at too. And then we're not going to get into foundational materials. I own a little company there that creates a modulator, a synthetic material to help modulate signals, but that's a little deeper. All right, so I'm going to set the context for why you buy and trade these stocks, because you have to be ready for the pullbacks. Remember, I said there's going to be big volatility and loud arguments about valuation. So when the corrections come in the stock market or in the industry or just in an individual stock, you want to be ready and have conviction about where you want to buy it. So as early as mid-February, I was preparing my people for a potential correction. And, you don't know what it's going to be. Is it going to be Iran? Is it going to be the Fed and interest rates? Or something else going on with the market. We had a bit of a credit crunch, private credit getting slammed with their investments in SaaS that they thought was going to, provide 50% ARR and 50% margins for forever, or even higher margins than that, I suppose. So we started talking about the potential correction in February. ABC, what does that stand for? Always be closing. Always be calculating what could go wrong. I have an exercise I run through called scenarios and probabilities. At least, from the super bullish to the super bearish, what could happen and what are the probabilities it could happen? And then how will you react? That mentally prepares you. So, and then always be cash affluent is my other ABC. Have cash, be ready. And so that's what I started preparing my people for in February. So on March 1st, I made a buy list because we were headed into potential Iran worries. And so this is how I prepare my people for stuff we want to buy when it's on sale. Bloom Energy, not related to photonics, but it is the unique energy provider with the solid oxide fuel cells that can be deployed in less than 3 months. And that stock just took off again. We were buyers under 140, and then it was a dip under 120 for a few hours, and we bought that. And the stock has been as high as 229 after Oracle re-upped their orders. We'll talk about applied optoelectronics. That's in our photonic wheelhouse here. We'll talk about Credo. And then on March 5th, I established these buy zones for Coherent and Lumentum. 240 for Coherent, under 600 for Lumentum. Was looking at Micron, finally got in Micron. And, I thought 350 would hold. It didn't. We ended up buying it at 330. SanDisk, I think he got a shot in SanDisk. Yeah, to under 550. And then Taiwan Semi. So that was early March, how we were preparing. Then on March 7th, I did another update. I looked at the QQQ charts because, I would just use the triple Qs as a map of where the correction could go. So we were ready for the volatility, and I use the phrase buckets. Have your bucket out, whether it's a limit order in the book or an alert, or you're just at your screen and ready to go. And so as of March 6th, all of these buckets got filled. Bloom Energy, Silicon Motion, which is a more of a NAND flash play, Coherent under 240, Light went down to 548. Just a great buy there for anybody who grabbed it. Micron went down to 350. SanDisk did go under 550, and Taiwan Semi under 345. So that was in my update. Helmets on, buckets out. All right. We'll look at a lot of these charts. We're going to look at Lumentum, Coherent, Credo, Applied Opto. We'll look at all the charts, show you where we bought them, where the next buying opportunity is. But, Credo has been a special story because it got caught up in the debate about copper versus optical. And so they got away with murder, knocking Credo, below $100. And it was just a steal down there. Everybody thought it was, left for dead because copper is dead. But my whole reason for even buying Credo was that they were becoming optical and innovating there. So we'll cover that shortly. And AOI. Sometimes I'll just call it AOI. That's what the company calls themselves, AOI, for Applied Opto. They've got their own brand of volatility because there was a new kid on the block who had some issues, say 8 years ago. I think I tried to buy this stock. Really depended on Amazon, like 50% of their business, and then just never became anything. Now they're claiming that they're going to basically 10x revenues from 2025 into 2027, from 450 million to 4.5 billion. And the street's taking them seriously, somewhat seriously now, because the orders are starting to roll in from hyperscalers. March 26th, I conducted a poll. This is from my school blog, and a lot of people chimed in. I was already leaning towards Coherent, but I just like to see what my people are thinking, what they already own, where they want to add, what they haven't learned about yet, and so this is the way we approached it there. We'll come back to Broadcom and Marvell. If I ever call it Avago, just stick with me. I've been trading the thing since the company was Avago. So, and the symbol's the same. Was looking for a bottom near 300, and then Marvell looking to buy a dip to 90, after it had run back up to 100. All right, so here was my triple Q map on March 30th. I updated this because 560 was my first support level for the Qs in this correction. Remember, we got the double top here at 636 in the Qs. So 560. Why 560? Well, it was the middle of this consolidation last summer, before the memory stocks took off. Memory stocks took off in September, memory and storage. Micron and SanDisk really started to move in late September. So that this consolidation, I thought, would provide some support as things pulled back in. And remember, the reason you're looking for, you're anticipating a correction in index is not because you're running for the hills or buying puts. It's because that if the index corrects 10 to 15%, that your favorite high beta stocks could correct 30 to 50%. And that's what you want to be ready for, is to buy those. So that's why I was looking at 560. But as Iran was heating up, in late March, I had to acknowledge the possibility, yeah, we could go significantly lower, and the QQQ could go into a bigger double-digit correction. And where might that be? Well, look at 520. 520 is the heart of this consolidation, which is December through February, December of 24 through February of 25. So to me, that's price history, that's price memory, that's investor interest where large investors will be watching. It also happens to be the 50% retracement of the move from last April's lows. So this is the April tariff crash where the Qs went down to 402, and then we rally up to 636. Well, the 50% retracement came in right at 519.50, so 520 call it. All right, so this is what I'm preparing my people for. 560 first support, 520 you buy with both hands. All right, and you got one more shot on Thursday, April 2nd. This is a note I put on the blog. I like pre-market, everything was down. I'm like, oh my God, this is a buying opportunity here. And then look at these swings because, so I'm anticipating it in pre-market, telling my people, get ready, have your buy list ready, because stuff is coming and it's going to fall in your buckets if you let it. And that's, boy, the opening on Thursday, April 2nd was just like your last gift to really get some bargains. And look at these ranges. I put in the high-low ranges at like before noon, AOI, $81 to 103. Coherent, 231 up to 261. Lumentum, 707 up to 817. Micron went down to 340, up to 365. ARM, 145 to 152. All right. Before we look at some charts, this is an important thread on my school blog, AI Stock Investing. Optical Event Horizon. I wrote this the day that I first bought Lumentum. On January 8th, I bought Lumentum at 350. And asking, better late than never? And I said, I think so. So at the time, I thought, well, my upside isn't fantastic, but it is fascinating. And by that, I mean, once I buy a company in an industry that I may not know much about, I really dig in. So this is where this thread really begins an exploration of optical and photonics. And I pivoted back to almost a year ago, GTC in March of 2025, where Jensen started talking about silicon photonics. That's the way he phrased it, because remember, we've talked about this before, in an NVIDIA rack, let's say the Grace Blackwell 300 Ultra. It's 7 feet tall. It's got 72 GPUs in it, 36 Grace CPUs. And within that rack, the GPUs are connected by copper because Jensen loves copper. His VP of networking, Gilead Shaner, he loves copper because they say copper works great for those short distances, connecting GPUs within the rack. So that's called scale up within the rack. It has no resistance, generates no heat. That's why I still love copper inside the rack. Then to scale out, meaning connect one rack to another across the data center, several racks, in a super pod, that's where silicon photonics comes in. That's where you need lasers and optical to, when you're past a meter or even half a meter, that's what you want to be using to connect the racks together. And then obviously for scale across, which could be connecting data centers. All right, so this is a good blog to look at. A lot of stuff in here. I'll refer to it again. Oh, actually, within that thread, So GTC again was the week of March 16th. Something else was going on the week of March 16th, and that was OFC, which is the Optical Fiber Communication Conference. That was in Los Angeles, while GTC was going on in San Jose. OFC had all of our optical stars. Lumentum presented there. And Michael Hurlston, if you don't know anything about him, back up 1 second. So that's Michael Hurlston right there, the CEO of Lumentum. Guy knows his stuff, and he's a great speaker too. So there's a video right there in this blog that you can watch of him. I don't know if he's on TV or it's something else. Speaking of TV, he was on Bloomberg in Tokyo, April 10th. So just a week ago Friday. And because they have facilities in Tokyo, they just bought a Qorvo facility in, I believe, North Carolina or South Carolina that they're ramping up to get their production ramped up. So this is I've got the full deck linked, but I also highlight some slides from Lumentum at OFC, and this is where the stock really started to take off again. I also have Coherent slides because Coherent was at OFC. All right. Charts are coming up here. But I also have this thread going about why is NVIDIA still stuck at $180? Yeah, like so I wrote this in what would have been late March. So basically, March was the 8th month where NVIDIA shares are basically flatlined at $180. Now, with this recent takeoff after the market has just reversed and made new highs, NVIDIA is finally up to 200 and threatening to move higher. But this thread goes over the arguments, bullish and bearish, on NVIDIA, from not a technical point of view, from an industrial point of view, from, are we seeing peak GPU demand? What's the competitive threat from TPUs? And are investors anxious, worried, in a hurry to call the top? Like, oh yeah, 2027 is going to be peak GPU demand. We might as well say sell NVIDIA now. So that's that debate. A lot of good stuff in there. All right, time to get to the charts. Okay, so here's Lumentum. Remember, I was telling my people in early March, look to buy it under 600. Many did. I didn't add. I was long at 350, and I just didn't have enough cash in my portfolio and to move fast enough to shift into adding Lumentum under 600, which is what I should have done. So still long from 350 back here in early January. Missed this opportunity, but I gave my people enough of a heads up that they could add. So where would I buy it now? What pullback? After this ramp up above 900, 750, 700. That's where I'd be looking. You're going to come back into the 50-day. This chart was taken. This snapshot is Monday morning, April 20. So you're getting a pretty fresh look here. The 50-day coming in at 704. But I'd be buying ahead of that 750 and, take the volatility swing that you get. All right, Coherent. Remember I said buy below 240, and we got a great dip here down. It looks like just below 220 for some people, and then just rip into new highs. Coherent actually has bigger sales than Lumentum, pushing over 8 billion into next year, and a better price to sales ratio. Coherent, they have a really broad stack in optical and photonics. So where would I buy it on a pullback? Again, this is from this morning. I'd be aggressive and be buying 300 to 280. It's stalled here a little bit at 300. I think you can buy below 300. And if you got a shot at the 50-day coming in at, 260, God bless you, go for it. But I would probably be a buyer before that. So, and again, here's another one I didn't squeeze into the portfolio, but what I did something right here, is I bought a 2x levered ETF on, when did we buy this? Well, we bought it below 30. I think I either bought it on April 2nd or, right in here, first week of April. We bought it below 30. And then I cashed it in last Friday above 50 for a 70% plus gain in just 2 weeks. So, and with 8 times less capital, right? I mean, buying the thing under $30 instead of buying Coherent at 300. And so that's the kind of flexibility if you're able to trade the levered ETFs and you've got a level. Oh, my level was 240 for Coherent, and I was like a day late. So really, we ended up buying when Coherent was pushing above 250. But it worked out great. So if you can trade the levered ETFs, your timing has to be good. You've got to. They don't always work, right? You don't buy them and hold them. You've got to, if you've identified a value zone where you want to be long a stock and you don't have the capital, then you can try one of these. All right, let's get to AOI. So this is a thread I have going, started on March 12th. AOI in this optical spotlight, because we started buying below 100. Why? Because on February 26th, on their earnings call, they detailed how their business was growing so fast, and based on their conversations with hyperscalers and what they needed in the optical photonic arena, from pluggables to networking, that they were going to be able to do 378 million in sales per month in the second half of 2027. Well, if you do the math there, that's 4.5 billion annually, and that would be a 10x from their 2025 revenue of only 450 million. That's a big claim. So again, I mentioned that they had disappointed investors in the market and Wall Street 7 or 8 years before, and I think Hindenburg was a short in 2019, saying there was accounting fraud and big promises, and so AOI was in the cellar for a long time. But now the street is starting to take them somewhat at their word. What if they can deliver half of this? What if they're not full of it? So that's why the stock launched from, say, 50 up to 100 in late February, and then we were buying the pullbacks, but expecting a lot of volatility. So this thread on my school blog has a ton of details. I just keep adding when I find new research. All right, so here is the AOI chart. So again, this is the pop in late February on their projections for sales, and that 378 million was very detailed. It was covered about 4 or 5 different product areas. So, something to pay attention to. So we bought this first dip back under 100, watched it go up to 130, and I wanted to add more, but I'm not going to add at 130. I knew this thing would be volatile. Sure enough, we get a pullback here. I was telling my people, hey, let's see if it cracks 80. That's what I was saying all through March. Is it going to crack 80? I finally bought more at we bought it like 95 and then 88 for a nice average under 100. And there was one day where it spent a few seconds below 80, and that was it. And some people bought there They had orders ready, but then, it's just taken off because new orders keep coming in. They're true to their word so far. They get a $200 million order from a hyperscaler, then another 70, 80 million order, then another 200 million order. And some of these look to be recurrent. So if they can keep that momentum building, then that's why the stock is up here. So would I buy new positions at 160? Probably not. I just did a report on this for the projecting it as a potential stock to double. And I said, if you look at the implied volatility of the options, they're at 90, 100%. So that translates into a daily volatility of 9 or 10%. And so you're going to have these big swings. So where would I establish positions or add new? 130 to 110. So wrapped around 120 here. It's like 120 is not going to be support necessarily. And, it could go all the way back to 100, but I'd be looking to add there. All right. So I've shown you some things where we've done well, but you can't win them all. And that's my story with Marvell. I was faithfully long Marvell for several quarters in the 65 to 80 zone, but had to let it go because other ideas looked better and my cash was limited. And I told my group, I showed you that poll from March 26th. I said, buy it on a pullback to 90. And you got that last dip on March 30th. It came back to 90. That's this red candle here. That was that day, when, those couple of days there, March 30th and April 2nd, when things were just flipping around because of worries about Iran. And then Jensen comes in with his next $2 billion investment in Silicon Photonics because Marvell is active. Marvell, yeah, we knew about Marvell. The reason I liked him even more in December, and the stock was getting no respect, is they bought a company called Celestial AI. Celestial AI was a private company. I think they paid, I don't know, $3 billion for it. But they make something that they branded as a photonic fabric. Since Marvell is building custom ASIC systems, and trying to provide that networking stack, Celestial Photonics plugs right in. And Jensen liked it enough to invest $2 billion, just like he did in Lumentum and Coherent. And since then, there's been nothing but good news. And you can see this snapshot is from the opening this morning on April 20th. The stock gaps up to over 147. Why? Because Google is in talks with Marvell to contract a bunch of TPU stuff. So nothing but good things happening for Marvell now. Completely missed it. I was out of it. Thankfully, a lot of my followers were in it or took the cues to buy it down here near 90, and so they're enjoying that. Where would I buy Marvell on a pullback? Say 125 to 115. You've got two gaps there. It's going to fill at least one of them. It's probably going to fill this. Obviously, it's going to fill this one first, 140. But if we get some volatility, and maybe that's not till midsummer. But it certainly wouldn't take another closing of the Strait of Hormuz to hurt things either and give you a nice pullback. So that's my buy zone for Marvell. All right, here's a good note. Just a summary. Barclays upgraded Marvell. This was so this was almost 2 weeks ago. Well, it says 11 days ago. Okay, so this was that first full week of April. And you can see they're looking at the optical nature of what Marvell is doing. Our math implies that optical could grow 90% for Marvell this year and next, even with some share shift to Broadcom. So, and just getting integrated into NVIDIA, NVLink, Fusion, and that's why they move. Tom O'Malley moves his price target to 150, and we're already there. So, all right, let's talk about Credo, another one that got away. So Credo here spikes above 200 on their earnings reported in November, and then just enters this slow grinding bear market. And I was buying all the way down. And I told my people, just keep buying it at 9,100. I actually had to let it go because I wanted to buy other things like AOI and probably Bloom Energy. And then, this big pop right here is they bought a photonics company called Dust Photonics. And if you know who the venture capitalist is, Gavin Baker, he runs his own hedge fund, but he was at Fidelity for like 25 years. He ran Fidelity Select Technology portfolios and probably their semiconductor. So, he was a hardcore semi analyst at Fidelity for 20 years. Now he's investing in private companies. He was an investor in Dust Photonics, and guy knows his stuff. So Credo finally gets respect for being an optical company, even though I'll show you in a second the research I was doing in October through December. They were well established with products in optical, and Oracle was even partnered with them. Yeah, so here's my January 7th thread on the school blog. Credo, a reversal of fortune for purple. Purple is one of their trademark color for their copper wiring. This is within the rack. You're seeing that right here. So I go through in this thread, I go through presentations that they've done of how they're building out their optical business, and they're not just dependent on copper. But the stock got trashed anyway. It was great. If you were ready to buy it, 90 to 100, you've done well. All right, Broadcom. Remember, I showed you the poll I did on March 26th, and I said, I think you got to be a buyer of Broadcom here, near above 100 or 300 rather. Look how long this has gone on. Just almost like Credo. What Broadcom's doing fantastic things, and just gets no respect. And then finally, once Iran fears are sort of processed and digested, everything takes off. So where would I buy Broadcom? 380 to 360 for sure. All right, here's a thread on the blog, Trading the Optical Basket, which is basically our topic today. I started this thread on Friday or Saturday, and I've got a video here, a 6-minute video on Fabrinet. I follow a really sharp guy in semiconductors. He looks at memory and photonics, and he'll take a report that he's either gotten from an investment bank analyst or something that he just created on an LLM. He'll toss that into Google's Notebook LM and then have it make a video. So, I don't know, really good video. If you don't know anything about Fabrinet, find this thread, watch that 6-minute video. All right, here's another thread. One in the photonic stack or any semiconductor stack, you need the companies that test and measure. And they could be on either end of the spectrum of the supply chain, either before Taiwan Semi, uh, does something at the foundry or after. And at all points in between, there's testing and measuring. Does it work by itself? Does it work to specs? Does it work once it's plugged in to the broader system? So we just bought Viavi, symbol VIAV. There's A here. Amcor is building in Arizona near TSM because they provide, trying to think of the terminology there, not faceplates, something like that. Form, Keys, Nova, all these stocks have done well. And, I'm not going to look at the charts here, but these are other ones that you want to take the time to, if you get to know a company, obviously you get to know its fundamentals, and you're looking at the chart, then you're starting to, okay, where do I want to buy the dip here? So this thread goes through looking at a lot of these. And we bought Viavi, I don't know, high 30s when the street is like still behind on the growth story. So price targets are still like in the 30s. All right, another good thread here. There's a company called Light Counting. You can see on this middle slide down here, Light Counting. If you're not familiar with it, they do a lot of semiconductor research. And so Lumentum says they have a 90 billion TAM, total addressable market. And Light Counting says, okay, let's say the TAM, by our projections, optimistically is 100 billion by 2030. Can it really get there? So this thread is addressing, is this just a fantasy that the optical photonic market has a $100 billion total addressable market by 2030? And I linked to two other threads in here, the optical event horizon. But this is an important debate to have. While we're trading these stocks, we better know, because let's say you're super bullish and you believe that this is a 100 billion TAM that will evolve over the next 4 years. What you do is you love the controversy, you love the debate. Let's say somebody issues a bearish report. Optical stocks start getting downgraded. Data centers are getting delayed and canceled. They're bottleneck here, bottleneck there. Orders are slowing. Well, if you still believe that that's just a hiccup or a speed bump, then you're a buyer of those dips. All right, that's it. That's my roadmap for the photonic buy and trade for this year, the year of the photonic swing trade, so to speak. Here's where you can find the blog so that it's free. All I do is post research and news all day long. It's free to anyone. You just, you'll find this page. The group is called AI Stock Investing. You'll see this graphic. This is from Marvell projecting $1 trillion data center build out by 2028. This is a year old. We're already past. We're on track to probably 1.5 trillion, and that's confirmed by Goldman and Bank of America. So this is where you can find the school blog. Just you click a link, acknowledge that it's not investment advice, and we just share research, and then begin. And you can see you'll have access to all those threads where I just keep posting new research in the comments. All right. Thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you next month.